welcome to this Archiware plus RSTOR webinar Wednesday. We're going to be talking about Media Archive to RSTOR's software-defined cloud. I'm David Fox, that's me, bottom left, at Archiware in the UK. Also in the UK, I've got Steve and Mike from RSTOR. Hi guys.
Hey everyone.
Hi David, good afternoon.
Yeah, nice to be here with you. Thanks for joining us. Sorry to put you on the spot and suddenly have you trying to scramble for your unmute buttons. Right, so we've got a few slides to go through, just a bit of housekeeping to kick off with. We're really keen to get your feedback on this session. So there's a question box in the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar control panel. So anything that occurs to you, type it in there and we'll go through all of that stuff at the end. Between us, I think we can answer any of your questions. There's a couple of things to prompt you there. Are you already using cloud? How are you getting on with it? What made you pick the cloud vendor you're with? Cloud storage charges are something that we'll be talking about in a little while. So please put questions in. We are recording this session, so we'll share this as a YouTube link to all those people that registered, those that are attending now and those that haven't managed to make it. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about some Archiware stuff at the top there, and then we're going to talk about RSTOR a little bit. So let's just look at these bullets before we go into the details. So we're going to ask, why should we be archiving media files and why the cloud is a place that we might want to store that archive. In order to do that, we'll be looking at the Archiware P5 backup and archive products, mainly the archive product. But the backup product also works with cloud storage, so I've included it there. We'll look at where you can deploy the P5 software, because it's a software solution, so we're looking to provide you with software. You choose where you want to run it. There's lots of options. And Archiware P5 Archive has this mini asset management, media asset management, MAM functionality, where you can browse everything that's in your archive that's in the cloud storage. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail. We'll look at the RSTOR Space product, which is cloud storage with a fixed storage cost without egress fees. There's an opportunity for resellers there to white label it and sell it on to their end users. So that's quite interesting. This is a storage product that Archiware added over the past few months to P5 so that it's compatible with this storage product. We like it a lot. And RSTOR Transporter, which is another product from RSTOR, which we'll have a quick look at because I think it's quite interesting. It allows you to move data between S3 Cloud or Azure or Google and RSTOR's cloud, so you can basically move data around. If that, maybe you want to migrate away from a cloud provider, maybe you want to consolidate various different repositories of data so that's stored in the cloud to a single place. Doesn't have to be RSTOR. So it's a cloud bucket mover thing that we'll have a quick look at. So let's start with the Archiware information. I'm aware that some people on the call might not be familiar with Archiware. So archive media data to the cloud. Why? We see archive as a crucial workflow for companies involved in media files, so video, audio, etc. It allows you to deliver work and then capture what you delivered, all of the workflow files, the edit files, and so on that were created during that process. What you need to do is throw that into a long-term archive and keep it forever, and then you can come back to it, find it, search it, and repurpose a piece of production work should you need to in the future. You can pull it all back, make a different copy of it, and then re-archive that as well. So this allows you to reduce your production storage costs. Production storage is expensive because it has to be fast so that you can edit 4K video, etc. So you need to minimize the amount of work on that storage. Anything that doesn't need to be there should be in the archive, not on the live storage. That's what Archive can do for you. Once projects have been archived, our product allows easy search to find what it is that you're looking for, to see thumbnails and proxies of video and audio files, so you know that you've located the project that you're interested in before you actually pull it back to disk again. We're learning from a lot of our customers that there's a compliance element to archive which is being imposed upon a lot of post-production houses and so on, such that they need to have a good solid workflow for archival so that data is secure, usually either on tape or cloud storage. So we comply with that and we allow you to carry out that step. Historically, a lot of our customers, and they continue to use LTO tape. So this is a traditional archive media. It's big, it's fast, it's easy to store, it lasts for 20, 30 years, but it involves some fairly heavy upfront costs to buy the hardware. It's an on-premise kind of mechanical solution, so you need somewhere to host it, you need a server room, you need aircon, all of that stuff to go with this kind of tape library based solution. So a lot of people are looking at cloud storage because you avoid all of that upfront capital expenditure. You can just spread the cost by having a monthly payment for the amount of storage that you're using. It's elastic, so you don't need to pre-provision capacity. It'll just grow with your needs. That's exactly what RSTOR do. They've got all the disks that you need sitting there waiting for your data. And it's a simple thing to use. Cloud storage is really simple. I'll show you how simple it is to set up P5 and use some cloud storage for archive in a couple of minutes. So we have two products that can write to cloud storage. The P5 archive product on the right-hand side, as you see, it's about moving data from primary storage to create free space, keep stuff for the long term. Media asset management function helps to restore. There's even a drag and drop integration from the Finder or Windows Explorer, so you can just drag stuff into the archive. We integrate with some media asset, digital asset management products, and the product can write to disk, tape, or cloud. I didn't mention disk because it's a less common useful format for archiving. Typically it's tape and cloud storage, and overall this reduces the amount of data that you need to back up. And we also have a backup product on the left hand side, which is writing data to disk, tape, or cloud for DR purposes, disaster recovery purposes, as opposed to archival. So where can you run this amazing Archiware P5 software? You can run it on your Mac, Windows, Linux, and FreeBSD operating systems on your own kit. You can purchase QNAP, Synology, Netgear, NAS devices, search in the store, the app stores on those devices and find Archiware P5 and install with a single click. Or you can deploy, if you actually want to have a Linux machine running in the cloud infrastructure, then you can deploy directly into Amazon Web Services, or anybody else that, like DigitalOcean, anybody else that has hosts in the cloud, you can run as there. It's quite a nice combination of running P5 in the cloud. Accessing P5, accessing cloud storage means you get a lot of throughput between the P5 server and the cloud storage, which is what my demo will do. Actually, I'm running an AWS instance to run P5. And final slide, you'll see this in a live demo in a moment, but this is showing you a screen in the browser. So P5, like RSTOR, is all managed with a browser interface. And what we're looking at here is a list of movie files that have been archived at some point in the past, but within this web interface, although they're archived off to the RSTOR storage, we can see thumbnails, we can play back proxies of the videos, we can view and edit metadata that's been ingested captured from the original files, and when we're sure that we've found what we're looking for, we simply add that to a restore basket selection and then pull that back onto disk. It's all very simple. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to some information about RSTOR. I'll hand you over to Steve, who's going to begin by talking a little bit about RSTOR Space. So over to you, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, David. So yeah, RSTOR Space is our globally distributed S3 object storage. It's really a combination of storage, but also networking. So we run a mesh network globally that's highly optimized for transmitting large objects and allows us to actually transmit those objects and move them around the globe, overcoming the impact of distance and latency. So Space is a relatively new offering compared to public cloud. So when you're in the public cloud, you very often find customers complaining about confusing billing models or worrying about their data being trapped there and all the additional fees that they get for ingress and egress. So with RSTOR Space, we believe that you should be able to freely access your data. So you just pay for the capacity that's consumed. You're not paying for API calls, you're not paying when you list the objects, and your data is immediately available for you as well. and you also have the opportunity to move it within your region as well and hold multiple copies. So if we move on to the next slide, please, David. So what do you get? What's included with RSTOR Space? Well, the first thing is we've got a scalable design. We actually intelligently lay out the objects as they're written into our infrastructure. So typically on average, you get around about 10x better performance on public cloud providers. So we lay out the objects based upon whether they're large or small, and do that in a way that actually boosts the performance. We're deployed in co-location facilities around the world, so the Equinixes, the Interactions, the core sites, and that means that our storage is actually located with low latency access on the on-ramps into public cloud. So if, for example, you wanted to combine RSTOR Space with some services running in public cloud, you'd have very low latency access to the storage. You've got the opportunity to geo-disperse replicas of your buckets as well. And there's no charge for replication within region there as well. So if you're going to have 2 copies in a bucket, you just pay for 2 copies of that data. We also have the ability, if you want to intelligently move your data around our global infrastructure. So if there's a change in access pattern, we can temporarily move, essentially, imagine it's a cache of your S3 bucket, move that closer to you, because we also use geolocation techniques to work out where in the world you're accessing our infrastructure. As I said before, we believe that you should be able to freely access your data, so there's no ingress or egress charges in there as well. And we also believe that your data is important to you, so you get 11 nines of durability as we're storing that data. If you combine our standard erasure coding that we use 8+3 erasure coding, you can also have a couple of replicas, and that'll give you those 11 nines of data durability.
Excellent.
So, on to the next slide. So what don't you get with RSTOR Space? Well, again, just to hammer home the point, there's no fees for gets, puts, or other API charge calls when you're looking at your data. No fees for ingress or egress or inter-region transfers. You get to, if you want to store 2 copies in the UK or in the US, you don't have to pay to move them between those inter-regions. And it just means it's really simple. So unlike public cloud, the costing is really predictable, and it allows you to control and forecast your costs.
Excellent. Next slide for you. Yep. I was going to say
Great.
there actually that I think one of the things that we mentioned earlier was that your costs are cheaper than Glacier, or were they the same as Glacier? But Amazon's Glacier is often used for people's archives, but it's not actually like an online storage. You have to recover data in Glacier back to S3 storage before you can restore it back to disk on premise, and so you incur both the Glacier costs and also some transfer fees and some storage fees in S3 to do it that way. Whereas with Space, you're paying Glacier prices, but you don't incur any additional fees when you want to recover data.
Yeah. Essentially, you can think about it as being a Glacier price, but essentially better than S3 standard performance. I mean, Glacier can be attractive for certain types of data workflows. If you're going to store something and never look at it ever again, that's a good use case.
Yeah.
But to be honest, the need to access data these days has become more and more unpredictable. As people collaborate more, people share information more.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, RSTOR Space gives you instant access to your data globally, but at an equivalent to a Glacier type of price, and really, with those kind of deeper archive technologies in public cloud, as soon as you look at a handful, 4%, 5% of your data, you're already going to be more expensive than RSTOR Space.
Yep.
Great. And one thing we wanted to make any resellers aware of that are joining today's call is it is possible to white label RSTOR Space and brand it and offer it out to your customers as a managed service. This is something we've seen a number of times, certainly in EMEA, where resellers have come to us saying that their end users are asking them for an alternative to the big three object storage, and they are able to very quickly offer out RSTOR space as a managed service. And what this allows them to do, well, really a number of things. It can create a new recurring revenue stream, a SaaS recurring, so that's always helpful if the reseller is focused predominantly on sort of one-off sales of hardware. It allows you to get into additional or more sales cycles by bundling a white labeled space. It might permit you to address more of your user requirements. And a couple other points. Some resellers historically have been offering a managed service, but they've been doing it with their own managed environments like a Cloudian, and with the arrival of space, they can just outsource all of that effort to us. So keep that in mind as you listen to today's presentation, and if it's something of interest, then by all means do get a hold of us.
Great, and another slide on Transporter.
Cool. So as I mentioned before, we've got this global mesh network and all these multiple points of presence in different countries, and we'd actually optimized our software-defined network to move large objects around and basically overcome latency. And we did that by doing these transmissions and breaking up objects into smaller pieces and just sending them around in parallel. And so we realized that actually this could be beneficial for other use cases as well, and moving data between clouds, whether they be private clouds on-prem or whether they be between public clouds. And that's what Transporter is essentially. It's a software as a service offering, so there's no infrastructure that you have to deploy, and it's basically designed to very efficiently and very simply transmit huge amounts of data between clouds. So it's really simple to run. I'll show the interface in a moment, but essentially it allows customers to very quickly and very efficiently move data around whilst controlling the complexity and the cost. So today we can actually let's just have a look at.
Yeah, I'll switch ends with you, Steve, so you can share your screen.
Yeah.
Yep,
cool. So I've just logged in. Perfect. So I've just logged in now to my environment, and you can see I've just a while ago done a migration, and this kind of gives me a summary of what's been going on. So it was successful. Everything went across. It's given me an estimation of what the costs were for that. At the moment, there's no transfers going on. I'll show you how to set up a transfer. It's just very simple. And you can actually get a history here of transfers that have previously taken place. I mean, literally, to perform the migration, all you do is plug in your source and plug in the destination. So let's say, for example, here, I'm going to pick a US, I'm going to pick a region. All I do here is just, pump in my access key, my secret key. By default, if I don't put in a prefix, it will migrate the entire bucket, but I could restrict that to a certain prefix setting, and then I could just pick another destination. So we've had customers use this as a way to migrate their data from public cloud to RSTOR space, but equally we've had customers who actually just wanted to move their data out of one cloud to another. So let's say, for example, perhaps they're consolidating what they've got in clouds, or they want to actually have a duplicate, a backup copy of their data in another cloud in case that there's an outage. They can very simply do that using Transporter. Again, all you're doing is just very quickly pumping in those secret keys, those access keys, and away you go. So it's very simple to set up. Once we've actually had the migration queued up, we'll use Transporter nodes that sit within our infrastructure, and then we'll actually analyze, we'll hook up to the source and the destination, we'll analyze that source bucket, and then we'll break that task up into lots of parallel subtasks, and then the Transporter nodes in our infrastructure will then go get all that data in parallel. They'll pump it through encrypted tunnels through our network mesh, and then send that across, put that across into the destination bucket. Once the task is finished, we'll run some integrity checks to make sure that all your data go across, and then you'll either just refer back to the reports that we've got here, or in fact, if you want to, we dump a copy of the report in the destination bucket, but also you can actually have a summary of the report emailed to you as well. So it's just really simple. It's a great way to move large amounts of data from cloud to cloud and just do it very simply and very efficiently.
That's great. Thanks for showing us that. I'll just grab the screen back.
Cool.
Okay, so right, so what we have next is I'm going to give you a little demo of using P5 to archive some data into RSTOR. And so let's just come out of slides for a moment and switch to just here. Inevitably it logs out by the time I get back to it, so I'll just log back in again. So I'm logging in as a customer to an RSTOR account, and anybody that's familiar with Azure AWS Backblaze is familiar with the idea of the bucket, which is a kind of globally uniquely named item where you can store things. So I can come up here and I can create a bucket. My account's limited to the UK. There's a couple of different endpoints in the UK that I can use. I create a new bucket in here, and then I add that to a group so that the relevant permissions are set. I've got a bucket already created here, P5 test number 1, which has just got 20 gigs of data that P5 archive has written to it so far. That bucket has been configured in my P5 server. So this is P5 running actually on an Amazon Web Services Linux instance up in the cloud. I'm connecting to it via its public IP. It's entirely administered via a web interface, so we could set up HTTPS for this as well to be a bit more secure. So within this interface, I can. It's expired as well, so let me just log back in. Within this interface, I might first want to go and set up my RSTOR bucket so that P5 knows how to write data to it. So I do that in here. We support RSTOR's multi-part uploads, which means it goes faster and there's less data to retry should a particular upload fail. So you can choose your upload chunk sizes, and you can also test compatibility in this window. This is something that was new in 6.1, so this will run a bunch of tests against that cloud storage and do a little bit of file transfer, a little bit of metadata writing and deleting, making sure all the different things that we need to do with P5 against that cloud storage work, so you can be sure that you're not going to have any problems with it. Once that's done, and of course you can have other cloud services configured in here, we would then configure an archive plan. So here's one of those, which is set to use the RSTOR service, the RSTOR storage. One thing I just wanted to point out was we have the concept of an auto archive. So if you don't want to interact and tell P5 what to archive, you can point it at a host and a folder on that host and give it a schedule to say at midnight every day or every 6 hours, archive the contents of that folder, and we'll just go ahead and do that. We can do that on a full or incremental basis via this drop down here. So if you do an incremental and you're archiving some folder that is partially already archived or has been archived, but maybe you've repurposed some files, then you can run an incremental archive. We'll just save the changes. We won't save the whole folder again. It saves you time and storage. The preview tab here allows me to configure ImageMagick and FFmpeg to generate and create thumbnails and proxies of media files that we're archiving, including audio files. And under metadata, we can write a simple shell script to extract metadata from the media files that we're archiving and store that away in Archiware's index, so you can see and search that metadata after the archive is completed against the data that's now in the cloud. So that's the archive plan that we're going to use. I'm going to use this manual archiving button on the left-hand side. I'm going to jump into this CCTV footage folder where this is a live file system. So these are files that exist on a file system on this host, and basically I can just choose what I want to archive at this point. So let's just choose a few of those files. I'll add them to my archive selection. I could move around different folders, different hosts, and build a bigger list of things I want to archive. And then I'll just choose to archive those files via the RSTOR archive that we've just configured. And now we have a running job inside of P5. Completed jobs that recently ran are at the bottom. Running jobs are at the top. This job is writing those files directly to the RSTOR storage, but also indexing them and capturing thumbnails and metadata at the same time. So once that's finished, we'll have both the data that we want to archive safely stored away in the cloud storage, but we'll also have a browsable index where we can go see what we archived. So whilst that's just finishing up, if I go to the Restore tab at the top and go look at what's in my archive, we'll see, drilling down a couple of folders where that share was actually located, you'll see that we have all of our AVI movie files that were in that folder now listed on the left-hand side with an archive date. When was it archived? When was it modified? How big is it? Then this pane here allows me to see a thumbnail for each of those videos. This is all open source CCTV footage. And then if I click on one of these, over on the right, you see a preview of that file. I've elected just to capture a 15-second preview, so this demo doesn't take too long when we're archiving new files, but you can capture the whole file if you want. And then down here, you can choose whatever metadata is available in the files that you're archiving is there to be captured and stored away in our index. So that means that I can either go select some of these files from here, because I know these are the ones that I want to recover back to disk because they've subsequently been deleted, or it might be that I want to just choose the whole source folder here and restore the whole thing, or maybe I want to do a search and I could search for things that where the archive date is exactly yesterday. Did I archive some stuff yesterday? I did, or today, and then I could search on file names. So I could come in here and I could say I want to just find things where the name contains the word bus, and let me just see all the bus files. And then if I click down here, everything that's playing back probably involves a bus. So yeah, and then I could choose from within the search results that I want to recover those files specifically. I click on the Restore To, and they'll come back to a folder of my choosing on disk. Final thing I'll show you is when you're browsing this folder, we have the concept of snapshots. So up here, you can see each date stamp when that folder was archived. And if I roll back to an earlier date, you'll see at this point in time on the 17th of March, at that point, I'd only archived one file. So this folder had one file in it at that point in time. And then if I roll forward a couple of days, I subsequently archived a lot more. So if you're archiving the same folder, the same project maybe, over time, every time you do it, you create a snapshot in our index, and then you can browse between the snapshots and recover what that folder had in it at that particular time. Because it might be that you're archiving a hot folder where it's always changing. You're always adding work to it each day, and you want to see what was in it on a particular day. So yeah, this web interface is where you do all of the configuration, administration, and where regular users can come in and get a restricted set of functionality just to do what they need to do. And it can work with this RSTOR cloud storage to build you a really good archive workflow that's simple for everybody to use. You don't need to be a really technical person to do it. So that concludes the live demo part of this presentation. This slide is here to remind you that you can always go grab the P5 software from this URL. Let me just make that full screen. So we have 5 and 30-day trial evaluation licenses available to all. They're fully functional, unrestricted, no limit on the amount of data that you can handle, so you can discover for yourself. Maybe you're interested in archiving 50 terabytes and you want to try some RSTOR storage and you want to see how quickly your internet connection works when you're doing this. So let it run for a few hours and have an idea of what's what. There's various videos that we've got on our YouTube channel that will allow you to set the thing up. So you go there to download P5, go here to set up an RSTOR account. We provided the emails for Steve and Mike at the top. We'll email you slides and all of this information if you want to get in touch with them. And I think that concludes our presentation. So I'm going to jump into the questions section of P5 now and just go through. There's various questions that we've been asked in here, which is good to see. So Chris says, would RSTOR space work as well with backup as well as archive? Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't show you the backup module within P5 today because we're sort of focusing on archive, but absolutely you can back up and produce a disaster recovery kind of set of data using the P5 backup module. Most of the P5 licenses that include archive also have the backup included, and the backup is a pretty standard writing full and incremental backups on a scheduler, and then basically the index that you just saw where we were browsing what we'd archived is very similar for the backup. It doesn't generate the thumbnails and previews and metadata, but otherwise it's quite similar. Another question from Chris. Cost is the only cost to RSTOR the 0.0045 per gigabyte per month. Are there any other costs? Steve or Mike, would you like to answer that one for me?
Yeah, I can answer that. That is correct. It's really just the storage costs, as Steve mentioned earlier. There's no egress, ingress, API fees, so that makes it very predictable. If you were to store a second copy, then it's just a straight doubling of the cost. So multiple copies are billable, but apart from that, there are no additional costs.
Okay, great. I assume that's probably what you wanted to hear, Chris, so thanks for that question. Got a question from Dan. How is P5 licensed for cloud storage? It's licensed per 40 terabyte. Well, basically, there's a thing in P5 licensing called a media management storage license, and you purchase as many of those as you need. Each one of them will give you 40 terabytes of cloud storage. So if you've got 10 of those, you've got about half a well, you've got about 400 terabytes, half a petabyte. So most of the bundled P5 licenses have something like about 25 of those licenses included. If you're using tape, then you use the same licenses to activate slots in a tape library. So each of those licenses either gives you a slot in a physical tape library or 40 terabytes of cloud storage. And that's what you need to know in order to have P5 running against RSTOR. Rajiv asks us, what's a typical license for archive? Similar kind of question for 100 terabytes and 200 terabytes. Okay, so 100 terabytes would require 3 of those licenses because they're 40 terabytes each, and so on. So you just need to divide the total amount of cloud storage that you perceive you want to access by 40 terabytes to arrive at the figure of the licensing. There is a configurator on Archiware's site that lets you plumb in some numbers and it'll tell you which products you need to buy. So that might be helpful. Question, this is from Mitch, is there a way to have a completely cloud-based archive storage and app? Yeah, there is. So kind of in the demo, I was running P5 in an Amazon S3 Linux instance, and it was writing to the RSTOR cloud storage. And in my tests, it goes, pretty much as quick as it can go. So what you would need then to do is to have some P5 software installed on the hosts on your on-premise machines where your data resides. And then from the interface on the web-based machine, you can browse that remote storage, select what you want to archive, and we will then connect to your on-prem boxes and pull the data up to the AWS instance and then push back out to the RSTOR storage. So yeah, entirely that's possible. We have some videos on the YouTube channel actually that explain how to set that up with some schematics about how that works. So if you want, Mitch, if you want to send me an email, I'll ping over the links for where you get some more detail about that. Thanks for the question. Matt is asking, what line speed do you need minimum to support professional cloud archive use? Any thoughts on that, Steve and Mike? I mean, I know in London, close to me, in central London, where a lot of the post-production VFX facilities are, it's quite cheap to get a gigabit, which is like a pretty fast line to start doing cloud-based archive. But do you see people using slower links than that, or what would you say?
I think most post-production houses I've spoken to have got got a gig, or they might be using other services like SohoNet and their sort of networking environments and having some slower line speeds, but the ability to burst. It's going to vary from customer to customer and use case to use case, really.
Yeah. So a good baseline if you're kind of shopping around to get a cost. See what it costs to get a gig map, and then go from there. But yeah, a gig is speed of a lot of Ethernet networks from a couple of years back before people were getting onto 10 gig. So yeah, good baseline. A couple more questions before we wind up. Thanks everybody for sticking around. Mac is asking, can I control what country my data resides in? ? I assume that's with relevance to RSTOR storage. Steve, you've got various different locations. I don't know where Mac is resided, but like in the US, you've got, well, he's asking about countries, so yeah.
Absolutely. So when you're configuring the buckets that you're going to use, you can specify, is it just going to be a single copy in a single location? Or you might say, look, I just want to have 2 copies of my data, but it's going to be 1 copy in San Jose and 1 copy in Denver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it was Chris that was asking questions earlier. He was asked to follow up. Is there any way to seed data to RSTOR by sending a drive? I know that's something that Amazon and Backblaze both offer, and we hadn't discussed that.
Typically, customers would look to do that using the transporter tools, but I guess that would depend on the amounts of data you had in mind and the kind of connectivity you had in place. So most people will use transporter. And we can do things like bandwidth limiting on the source as well. And if you've got an active data set, which a lot of people do these days, rather than a kind of a passive data set that's not doing anything, which you might use with, say, a cloud-based Snowball or something. But if you've got changing data, transporter will actually do incremental updates as it moves the data. Okay. And later on this year, we'll actually have the ability to do synchronous updates when doing transporter migrations as well.
Okay. So somebody could grab themselves a Snowball from Amazon, for example, get their data into S3, and then just pump it over to RSTOR. So you could kind of piggyback off somebody that is offering.
Yeah, I mean, that could be an approach, or just do it straight from on-prem object storage. Later on this year, we'll also be able to have NFS as a transporter source as well.
Okay, so you can actually hook up to an NFS share on customer's premise and suck data from there. Yep. Interesting. Okay. Nearly through the questions. Where did we get to? That last one was Matt Conrad. Conrad's asking, can transporter do incremental copies between clouds? I think you kind of answered that just then, didn't you? You said that it's possible to run a transporter job from A to B, and then when you run it the next time, it'll compare the two. Anything that you've introduced that wasn't copied the first time, you'll copy that across.
Correct, yeah.
Last question is from Carl. How can I restrict access to RSTOR? I guess we're talking about access control here. There's lots of permissions and ways that you can secure it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, as in any S3 object storage, you can create users, access keys, rotate those keys, delete keys.
Yeah.
You can assign policies to those users that can limit their ability to see buckets or write data or delete it, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we can also put restrictions on whereabouts in the global IP world can actually access a particular account. So you could look at say, look, only access is only allowed from this public-facing IP address,
okay,
or perhaps this public subnet range.
Mm-hmm.
If a customer is perhaps in the same co-location facility as us, or one that's nearby and run by the same business, then we can do things like set up cross connects and metro connects and those sorts of things. So your data, your access isn't actually going out over the open internet, it's going through a more direct connection within the co-location facility. And actually we also have partnerships with people like Packet Fabric and Megaport that can also do that kind of site-to-site or kind of cloud to cloud software-defined kind of hookup as well. So there's lots of different ways of locking down the environment and securing it.
So I hope that answers the question, Carl. I think it's basically that RSTOR has all the same kind of security mechanisms that you would expect them to have. Right, last chance if anybody wants to ask any subsequent questions or follow-ups to what they've already asked. But if everybody's happy with that, I think that's been quite a nice informative webinar. It's 22 the hour, so we haven't taken up too much of your time. Thanks everybody then for joining us this afternoon or wherever you are. As said, we will email everybody that registered for this webinar. We'll send you slides, contact details, and a link to this presentation recorded on a YouTube link. Please share widely. So thanks everybody for your time. Thanks Steve, thanks Mike, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Cheers.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
Thanks guys.